Hey guys, SoCal Val here. You are listening to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast.
I got you, bro. Welcome, everybody, back to the Hitting the Turnbuckle. I'm your host, Andy Burrows, and as always, I'm joined by my illustrious co-host, Mr. Adam Cousins. Adam, how are you, brother?
Good evening, mate. How's your Monday?
Yes, Monday, usual Monday in jolly old England, rainy, wet, and cold. But we are also joined by the queen of the microphone as well in the Hitting the Turnbuckle. Fiona is with us. Fiona, how are you, darling?
I'm great, Andy. How are you? Long time no see.
I know I haven't seen you since we were at AEW together in the summer. It seems like
months ago.
Seems like a long time ago. We were in the nice warm weather in London. But Adam, we said all the time when we started this show that we want to attract some. We've got some guests that we must have on. If we can get them, we want to try and get them. Adam, I think one of the ones at the very top of the tree is with us today. Adam, who have we got joining us today, my friend?
Actually below me on the screen, but yeah, I mean, someone that was, well, pretty much our teenage years wouldn't have been as exciting without this gentleman running WCW. Done everything else as well, WWE, TNA. He has a great podcast as well, the 83 Weeks.
83 Weeks.
We're trying to be, but it's Mr. Eric Bischoff. Hi, Eric. How are you?
Hello, everybody. As the crowd goes. Silent.
Eric, how are you? We're good, Eric. How are you, my friend? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Eric, we always start these shows with the guests that we have. We always ask them, what do you think the state of wrestling is in 2023?
I think overall, the state of the industry is stronger than it's ever been. If you measure the industry by revenue, distribution, the mainstream or pop culture acceptance of professional wrestling, the footprint, the number of countries that professional wrestling is seen in around the world and the audience that it has around the world. I don't think there could be any argument that the wrestling in many respects is healthier today than it's ever been.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I mean, we've got WWE, we've got AEW, and with the way, do you feel that technology now is playing more of a factor in modern day wrestling? Back when you were running WCW, could you imagine if Twitter was around?
Yeah, that would have been fun, huh? I'd have been messing with Vince McMahon on a daily basis at that time. But
just sliding into his DMs.
Yeah, but if you look at technology, and I mean, social media is one obvious aspect of it, but if you look at the independent wrestling organizations around the world now that have access to streaming platforms and can affordably record their shows and put them on Fight TV or any of these other platforms that specialize in independent wrestling content, that's such a big advantage today that small independent promoters have, and the talent as well, because now the talent is, instead of being seen in front of 500 or 600 or 700 people at an independent show, which is great, now they're seen by thousands of people around the world. So it's just a better way to get your name out there and get your body of work out there.
True. Adam?
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to pick your brain at something that's happened recently, or at least at the weekend, that has divided opinion, shall we say, amongst maybe fans more than anybody else. I don't know if you've seen anything of the Texas Death Match that happened on Saturday with Hangman and Swerve. Just want to get your thoughts on it. And divided opinion mainly because one guy drank blood from the other guy. And I don't quite know at what point is that kind of level where you cross that line, so to speak.
I think they crossed the line and left it far behind in the rearview mirror with a stunt like that. Look, you're always going to have a percentage of the audience that gets off on that kind of content. They're, I don't want to say the lowest common denominator, but they're that small percentage of the audience that just loves the gore and the violence of professional wrestling. And that segment of the audience, although very loud and very vocal, is incredibly small. And I think one of the mistakes that AEW has made from day one is booking or writing or creating for the smallest segment of the audience. And in the process of doing so, you alienate the largest percentage of the audience, which is why last Friday night, WWE on SmackDown, granted, it's a network compared to a cable outlet, but TBS and TNT are both very powerful cable outlets. But when you've got SmackDown doing 2.25 million viewers and you have Rampage or Collision or whatever it was that was on Friday night doing 250,000 viewers, I think that that illustrates my point more than anything I can possibly say.
Yeah. Eric, do you think AEW were doing it more for the shock factor and for they knew that kind of match was going to appease some kind of fans, but it done what it set out to do? Like, I spoke to Adam, and I've seen on social media over the week, everyone, it's either they loved it or they hate it. It's got people talking about the product. And I remember back in the day when if you were watching a WCW or WWF, there was always, people were talking about the product, but for the right reasons. From what I'm getting from that AEW death matches, there's a lot of people talking about it for the wrong reasons. Personally, it's not why I watch wrestling, but can you see when that's being booked, they're thinking it's going to get eyes on our product no matter what, right or wrongly?
I don't think there's that much thought given to anything in AEW. I think it's run like a small fantasy camp or vanity project. I think that it's written, created, and produced for the social media audience. And I honestly don't know that I don't know that there's any strategy involved at all in AEW other than let's sign as many people as we can and come up with as many special announcements as we can and try to find ways to get interest in the product via social media. But there's really two odd, and this is where I have an issue with it. I think what AEW did was stupid. I think it was juvenile. I think it's the lowest common denominator in televised professional wrestling that appeals to the smallest segment of the audience. But there's another audience that matters even more, and that's the television advertisers that support televised wrestling. And you can say, yeah, but this was a pay-per-view, but there would not be a pay-per-view if it were not for television. Mm-hmm. And television networks, studios, advertisers, they don't differentiate between, well, that's on pay-per-view and this is on television. They look at the AEW product and the reaction that it gets. And I think AEW is finding new ways to alienate advertisers and sponsors. And the business of the televised wrestling business, that's critical to the foundation of the product. Mm-hmm. That kind of, it doesn't require creativity. There's nothing creative. It's shocking. Think of it this way. I don't know what it's like in the UK or Ireland or Scotland or Northern Ireland. Every culture has its different thresholds. But, and here in the States, it reminds me of going to, if you go to a state fair, here in the United States, every summer, every state has a state fair. And there's all kinds of things at that state fair. You have animal exhibits and all kids raising their farm animals compete, and you have rides and you have music and you have demolition derbies or car events. Oh, and you've always got a freak show. At every carnival, at every circus, every outdoor event like that, there's always the freak show where, the bearded woman or the baby with warts or the three-headed goat or whatever. And it's a very small part of that audience that wants to spend money to go find whatever joy they have in going to things like that. And that's the same thing that I'm seeing in situations like this out of AEW. It's like, oh, it's the three-headed goat AEW main event match. It's the freak show. Let's go watch that. That's not good for business long term. It is not. You're not going to grow your audience that way. You're not going to encourage advertisers and sponsors to want to be associated with your product. It does nothing to grow your business. It does everything to satisfy the smallest, lowest common denominator of a professional wrestling audience.
Definitely. Fiona, what did you make?
In other words, I think it sucks.
Yeah, but in other words, Eric wasn't a fan of that match.
No,
Fiona, what did you make of what you saw at the weekend, Fiona? I mean, I saw little bits online. I was scrolling through Twitter because obviously it happened Saturday night for us. I'm scrolling through Twitter. I'm like, why is blood drinking trending? I'm like, what is this? And then I'm like, oh, that's why it's trending. What did you make?
I'll hold my hands up. I've not seen it. I have no desire to see it, to be perfectly honest with you. I've seen posts on X and Instagram and Facebook and things like that. And after reading them, I was like, no. For me, that sort of stuff's just a no-no. That is not, for me, that's not what wrestling is. I don't like death matches. I certainly don't like that. There was a company had a death match show in Scotland for the first time at the weekend there, a company called Bleeding Gums. Apparently it was very well received. I have a friend, in fact I had two friends that were wrestling on the card, and they were like, are you coming? And I'm like, no, I don't want to watch you beat yourself up with glass and light tubes and all of that sort of thing. It's just not for me. That is not wrestling for me at all. And I kind of feel like AEW for doing that, there's a lot of kids that watch that. And okay, my kids are older, they're teenagers, but I wouldn't want my younger children, if I had younger children, watching that. Not for me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no.
Before we go any further, I have to say this. I'm with you guys. Not that I wouldn't be with you otherwise, but I'm here because of Fiona. She is the most wonderful person that my wife and I get to spend quite a bit of time with in our most recent tour over the UK. And it was one of the best times that I've had associated with the wrestling industry in decades. I had such a wonderful time. And Fiona, thank you again so much for
You are more than welcome.
just being fun to hang out with.
Yay! They're a good crew. They are a good crew to be with.
Eric, we were at AEW with Fiona, and she was the most popular person in the building.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, every time I turned around to talk to her, she was taking a selfie with someone. I was like, she's signing autographs in a minute, Eric. She's definitely going to be signing autographs.
As it should be.
As it should be. We are honoured to have her as part of our Hitting the Turnbuckle team with myself and Adam. Eric, let's talk some WCW. If I ever got the chance to ask you a question, I mentioned this to Adam. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the Inside the Ropes tour because I couldn't get out of work. What would the wrestling industry have looked like if WCW had won the war and not WWF?
Oh man, I don't know. That's a hypothetical, and I stay away from hypotheticals. I would like to think there would still be really healthy competition between WCW and WWE. But man, who knows? It's impossible to say. It would have been fun to experience. I wish it would have happened, but it didn't. And you know what? In many ways, I'm almost glad it didn't, because I had a great time working with WWE. That opportunity would have never happened if WCW would have stayed in business, more than likely. And I cherish that time. I made friends that are still very close friends to me to this day that were from WWE, and I still do business with WWE. There's nothing about my association with them that I'm not grateful for. So, I always say things happen the way they should. It may not feel like it at the time. And this is true in life. It's not just wrestling, but you go through things and you struggle and you're faced with challenges and you think, oh, it's never going to get any better. And then before you know it, it really does. And you look back and realize that had you not gone through some of those challenges or experiences, you wouldn't be the person you are. And the person you are is better off as a result of it. And the person I am and the experience I've had and the things I've been able to share with my family, we are all better off because of the way things happen. So I don't think about it much, to be honest with you. Unless I'm asked a question like this, I never really, a thought like, gee, what would life be like if WCW was still around? Never crosses my mind.
No, fair enough. Adam, my friend.
I want to go back because obviously I've got 3 letters on my shirt there, which we're definitely going to get to in a bit. But way before that, you had the interview at the time at WCW. I think he was up against, I think it was maybe Shivani and Jim Ross, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think there were others, but I don't know who they were.
Yeah, exactly. When you was going on there, what, and this isn't me sort of trying to handle it, but what do you think made you, or what did you think made you the best fit for that role at the time, other than maybe like a JR or a Shivani?
I think because in many respects, I came from the outside. Now, I had been in the wrestling business for 3, 4, 5, 6 years before I was given the opportunity to be the executive producer. So I'd been in the business for a minute and had done quite a bit. I promoted events, I sold television syndication, I ran the camera, I did editing. I learned how to do editing. It wasn't my job, but I learned how. I was in front of the camera. You know, there was not much in the business of the wrestling business that I wasn't at least able to touch and have some experience in. But for the most part, I was an outsider, especially within the Turner organization. Because if you go back in history, Ted Turner acquired Jim Crockett Promotions out of bankruptcy, basically, and renamed the wrestling promotion WCW. But a lot of the people that came to WCW initially were from Jim Crockett Promotions. Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, so much of the talent, and many of the people in the office. So by the time, that was in like 1989 and 1990. I came to WCW in 1991 as an announcer. Now, I had been working in a territory in Minnesota, a struggling territory, but I was a host of a show on ESPN, which is a major sports network here in the United States. 5 days a week, I was on TV. So I had some credibility, but I was so new that by the time I got to WCW, not only was I was considered an outsider because I wasn't from the original Jim Crockett kind of DNA in the southeastern part of the United States, that regional territory, Dusty Rhodes, Mike Graham, so many of the talent that was a part of it all. So I was an outsider because I wasn't part of the Crockett DNA, but I was also a newcomer. And I think because I came into the business from the outside, I didn't come up in the industry. I hadn't been, I don't want to say brainwashed because that's too strong, but I hadn't been convinced that the old way of doing things was the right way. So when I came in and had the opportunity to interview, I had some pretty big ideas. Not that they were great ideas, but they were big ideas and they were different ideas. More importantly than being bigger, they were different. So, for example, when Bill Shaw, who interviewed me to be the executive producer, while he was interviewing Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone and David Crockett and others, you know, Bill said, one of the first questions that Bill asked me is, what would you do differently with WCW than anybody else has done to grow the business? And I had an answer for that. And my answer was, in effect, to go after a different portion of the audience that we already had. I wanted to create a kids live action game show where wrestlers were coaches, but the kids were the players. And it was a non-contact, non-violent kind of competition that would have been suitable for kids that were between the ages of 8 and say 14. But they would have wrestlers as coaches and mentors, and it was just fun. But that's a way, by appealing to children, you're appealing to an audience that you don't already have. So many producers of wrestling, in my experience, have all been focused on the wrestling audience. AEW is focused on the internet wrestling audience. I don't care about them because they're going to be there anyway. I have to beat those people off with a baseball bat or a cricket club or whatever y'all call it. You know what I mean?
Cricket bat.
Cricket bat. There you go. I have to beat those people off because you can't keep them away. They're coming. the key to growing an audience and making your show bigger and becoming more successful is attracting those portions of the audience that don't already watch your show. And that's what I was focused on. And I think that's what got me the job, because everybody else in the wrestling business would come up with answers like, oh, we got to have longer matches.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's not new. Everybody's tried that. Oh, we have to have better interviews. Well, no shit, Sherlock. That's pretty easy. That goes without saying. And when I came in with a different angle of attack, as I like to say it, I think that made the people that were in charge of hiring me feel comfortable that we're going to try something new and something different. And that's what WCW needed at the time.
What was the reaction, Eric, when you, like I said, I've read the book all about Nitro and about how when you come in, what was the reaction from the people in the back and the quote unquote traditionalists of wrestling? Because when you come in
That's
and you want to flip the script, what's the reaction from these guys who are like, no, it's always been done this way, we can't change? And then you come in and go, hang on a minute, we want to try and attract this audience and we want to move it here. What's the reaction backstage from the quote unquote traditionalists?
You know, it was mixed. I had the good fortune when I got the job as executive producer. Dusty Rhodes was the booker. He was the head of creative at the time. And Dusty and I became friends right away. We just, similar souls, I guess. We liked a lot of the same things. We liked the same music. You know, we like to hunt. We're both kind of, I don't want to say, you know what rednecks are?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that we were rednecks, but we were more rednecks than we were yuppies. You know what I mean? We just liked a lot of the same stuff. And Dusty mentored me quite a bit when I first got to WCW, so that when I got the job as executive producer, I had a mentor on the creative side of the business. So there wasn't a conflict between Dusty and I in the way Dusty wanted to do things. Because in many respects, I learned from Dusty. I learned a lot from Dusty before I ever got the job as executive producer. I learned from Dusty. So that part of the transition was easy. Now you had the locker room. And I think even more importantly, you had the office, especially because there were some people in that office that were hoping to get that job. and the new kid got it. Like, what the fuck? Who hired the new kid? And he took my opportunity. You know what I mean? So I think there was some, not by everybody, because some people were really like Tony Schiavone, you know, even though he had applied for Tony Schiavone was one of my biggest supporters. You know, I got the job instead of him, but it didn't affect Tony that way. He was like, okay, you got the job, not me. What can I do to make your life easier? How can I help? And you got to want to hug somebody like that. You know what I mean? 1 minute you're competing for the same job. I got the job. He was the first person to reach out to me and offer to support and help in any way he could. And there were others like him, but there were some who were just like any other job. You know, you get a promotion, there's 10 other people that want it. Guess how they feel? Bitter. You don't necessarily express it to your face, because people like that are generally insecure and cowards. But deep down inside, they resented it. But I don't really care.
Yeah. No, yeah, definitely. Fiona, did the certainly with the early WCW days, it was a lot of what we see now in the NWA, and obviously the NWA were the faction back then, and a lot of their talent went into what become like WCW. Do you see a lot of resemblances to what NWA are doing now and to what WCW done back in the day?
Yeah, I think they're trying to maybe emulate some of that stuff from back then. I think at the moment NWA are going through a little bit of a transition just now. We don't really know what's happening with TV deals and things like that. I know the production and everything's all changed. I think, as far as I'm aware, Billy is trying to grow the brand and try and expand it and things. There are some similarities. I think touching on something Eric had said earlier on about talking about the territories and stuff, obviously they're kind of moving towards that system now. I don't know how that's going to go or how big that they're planning on growing all of that. But yeah, I think a lot of the WCW stuff, I only remember bits and pieces of it. I think I'd said to Eric at the time when we were talking about it, I didn't have access to cable TV and things like that. There was no internet, there was no YouTube. When I was younger, my family had no cable. So a lot of the stuff that I learned was through magazines or through other people telling me they'd seen it and things like that.
Younger,
So,
you're only 25 now.
yeah, that's it. So I missed quite a lot of WCW, to be perfectly honest with you.
But you know what, I think you're right. I think, from the beginning when Billy Corgan launched NWA, it was with a tip of the hat and a little bit of a wink to the territory system in a more traditional presentation of professional wrestling. When Nick Aldis was there, I spoke to Nick often, and one of the reasons that Nick enjoyed some of the time that he was there, when I spoke to him at least, it was because it was a more traditional presentation of professional wrestling. Like I say, with a tip of the cap and a wink to the original NWA back in the territory system. So I think that's part of the way Billy's trying to brand himself, and I applaud that. Because wrestling is a weird business, man. It's like, even Fiona, even when I was there touring, with you a month or two ago, people would come up and they would tell you stories about how they watched wrestling with their father or their uncle or their brother or whatever. It's a generational form of entertainment, probably much like sports is in some respects. And that tradition, that legacy has value. And there's a certain aspect of the audience that loves watching wrestling being presented in a storytelling fashion, where the matches actually mean something. And it's not just like a gymnastics, Olympic floor exercise event. And it's not all about the athleticism. It's also about the story and the drama and the emotion and the characters. And I think that's what Billy's striving to do. I'm not sure he's where he wants to be yet, but he's at least leaning in that direction. And I think that makes his product different than everybody else.
Just quickly following up on Eric before Adam gets in for his next question. Do you think wrestling is kind of, and it's probably the world we live in now, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and wrestling is moving with the times. Do you think it's kind of gone away from the traditionalism of why we all got into, and like Fiona says, why we all love professional wrestling?
I think it has to a degree, and it's very cyclical. And again, I think if you look at the WWE product, especially over the last 12 months, now that Paul Levesque has had a much more direct influence, he's not number 2, he's number 1. His decision stands, and I think we've seen, and we're going to continue to see, a much greater emphasis on storytelling in the ring and less emphasis on, holy cow, did you see that guy do, 720-degree backflip off the rope and land on a bicycle? Who the fuck cares? It's great. Now what? And I think with Triple H and in WWE storytelling, you just look at the last 12 months, the Bloodline storyline, it's cooled off a little bit because we're just about to heat it up again going into WrestleMania. Trust me when I tell you, the Bloodline will become a big issue here in another month or so, more so than it is now. It'll be a refocus on Roman and a refocus on Cody and a refocus on the Bloodline as a whole. But I think you're going to see much better storytelling. I think AEW is going to continue doing what AEW is doing, which is kind of shock TV, playing to the lowest common denominator. They're going to continue to do that until they realize, and they're on their way, that it's not working. They're not growing their audience. Their ticket sales are down. Their television shows are deteriorating each and every week. They've brought in as much ex-WWE talent as actually available. It's like a fucking conveyor belt from Stamford, Connecticut to Jacksonville, Florida. Leave here, go there. And there's nothing else left. There's no big signings left. It's all going to be about story, characters, drama, conflict, resolution. That's what it is. And it doesn't matter if it's a mainstream television show, if it's a drama, if it's a movie, hell, if it's a book, it's all about the characters and the story and the journey and the outcome. It's not about the car chase. Car chases are cool. If you go to a movie, yeah, you're going to get a car chase. You're going to get buildings blowing up. You're going to get that shot we've all seen a million fucking times where the hero and the hero and his team running away from us in slow motion every time. They're running away from the building that's blowing up and the flames are up behind him and they're running slowly into the ring or into the camera. Storytelling will always be the number one reason that people watch wrestling. They may get distracted with a bright, shiny object like AEW or some other promotion that comes along and they cut each open with pizza cutters and staple shit to each other's face and do all kinds of things that require absolutely zero fucking creativity whatsoever and only require a sick, twisted mind and somebody stupid enough to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah,
Adam, yeah. Nothing more to be said. I agree 100%. Adam, go on, brother.
Yeah, well, we go from that. You mentioned how good the Bloodline storytelling was, but way back when, before we had the Bloodline, we had these three letters on my show, which was that you created the NWO, obviously Hall and Nash. I can remember vividly because in England we had this program called Cartoon Network, and we used to have the Friday Night Wars in England. It wasn't the Monday night. We never had live WWE and WCW. We had it on a Friday. So we used to watch the Cartoon Network. Johnny Bravo used to be on. You probably know about that in the States. That finished and the Nitro come on. I vividly remember watching the show and coming from the stairs was obviously I knew him as Razor Ramon at the time, but it was the late great Scott Hall. In your mind, when you first got Hall and Nash, did you have sort of plans if one of them, say for example, I know you was talking to the Hall and then Nash come along soon after, but if you didn't say have a Kevin Nash, did you have a plan in place if that didn't work out with the negotiations with Kevin Nash?
No, because there was never any doubt. It all came to very quickly, came together very quickly, and it was very well synchronized. So there was never a moment when I thought, well, if I don't get this guy, I better come up with a plan B. So number one, it wasn't necessary to come up with a plan B. And number two, I've never been good at having plan Bs anyway.
And then obviously there was the third man, which you went into detail and inside the ropes. I'm not going to bore everybody with a story. It was going to be Sting or Hogan, and eventually Hogan took you to the outbacks of LA when he's doing a film and basically come together. That night when the Bash at the Beach, when this all happened, was you going back to the old days? And I remember Jim Cornette going on about when fans used to riot and go in with like guns and knives. There was a point there during the Bash at the Beach when this all happened because of the shock factor that you created. That could have happened. Was there any sort of preparation being done as to if this happens? Because you don't really know how the audience are going to react to it. But it was getting to that stage. Was there any plans in place where if things did happen, how to get out quick?
Nothing special, although, by that time we had good security. Doug Dillinger is a character that most hardcore WCW fans will remember that name because Doug Dillinger had been the head of security for a long time and spent a lot of time on camera as a result, which is why so many people knew him. But Doug would also hire anywhere between 4 and 8 other police officers, seasoned police officers, undercover police officers that were really good at crowd control and handling situations like that. So there was no special consideration, number one. Number two, even if I would have had access to a special operations team, nobody anticipated the kind of reaction we got. We knew it would be good. We knew Hulk Hogan turning heel would be a big damn deal. We didn't anticipate the crowd reacting the way they did. That was like, oh, this is awesome. But we weren't prepared for that. I wasn't.
No. Do you think, and just sidetracking a little bit, did WWE miss not doing it with John Cena when they had the chance? Or is it just because the world had changed, things had changed? John was doing a lot of Make-the-Wish stuff, but that could have been, I would say, it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in wrestling. Perhaps when they had the chance to turn him back heel after everything, they didn't do it.
think it's only a missed opportunity if you need that opportunity. I don't think WWE needed an opportunity for John Cena to be anything other than John Cena was. John Cena was very, very valuable to that company, not only as a performer on television and on pay-per-view, but he was probably the greatest ambassador to WWE and really to professional wrestling than there's ever been. John worked way harder away from the arena and away from the cameras, being a goodwill ambassador and doing good things for the right reasons. Not because he had to, not because he was paid to, but, and of course he made a lot of money, but John genuinely loved the Make-A-Wish effort. John did a lot of things that nobody's ever heard of. A lot of the things that John did, he didn't want publicity for. And when you're already so successful and you've got a brand ambassador like John Cena, and you don't really need to turn him heel because you're already doing really, really well, it's not really a missed opportunity. Now, I think I understand the flip side of that. You know, if you're what we call in the United States an armchair quarterback, or you're the type of person that wants to sit back in your office and share with the world what you would do if you were in charge, which is every motherfucker on the wrestling internet.
Just see our DMs every now and again.
But sure, could there have been a great opportunity there? Could have been really fun? Could have been interesting? Possibly. But in order for a heel to be a really good heel, you have to be a really real heel. There has to be a part of your personality that enjoys pissing people off. And I don't think there's a part of John Cena's personality that enjoys pissing people off. You can't fake that. Very few. It's why there's very few great heels. Everybody wants to be a babyface. Who doesn't want to be loved? Who doesn't want women and children and grown men to throw themselves at you and go, oh, you're my hero? Who doesn't want that? Right? We're born with that. How many people are like me or MJF? Not so much now. I don't like the heat now, to be honest. I enjoy getting along with everybody now. But back in the day, I much preferred to piss people off. Absolutely enjoyed it. But not very many people embrace that. Most people have a hard time fighting their nature, which is to be loved, and embrace being a heel. But there are those select few that love being a heel. Because the truth is that's where the power lies. When you're the heel, you can manipulate the audience. You can make them do exactly what you want them to do, exactly when you want them to do it. You can make the babyface look like $1 million, or you can make the babyface look like a piece of shit. It's all up to you. Being a heel, that's why Ric Flair loved being a heel.
Yeah.
Now, Ric Flair was especially as Ric Flair got older, it was always a challenge, with Rick, because we all looked at Rick and went, oh man, you're the heel's heel. You're the babyface's babyface, because Rick had been around for so long. And that's one of the things that happens, when you're a guy like Ric Flair, you've been around as long as Rick has. They may have hated you in your 20s and your 30s and even into your 40s, but by the time you reach your mid 40s or you're going into your 50s and you're still out there and you're performing at a high level, they love you. There's just like this organic respect and admiration for someone like that. And I would go to Rick and say, Rick, look, I know, you like being a heel, but these people love you. I said, Rick, to be honest with you, you could walk out to the ring with a litter of puppies, soak them in kerosene and set them on fire and stomp the puppies out, and people will still cheer you.
Next week on AEW, that's exactly
coming up on Dynamite next
stopping main event.
MJF versus a litter of puppies. Oh my God. Don't give them ideas, for God's sake, whatever you do. Oh my days. Eric, one thing I've always been interested in as well, it was always known back in when WCW was live and Monday Night Raw was recorded. And we all know that when you were in the ring, and we all know about Mick Foley winning the title, etc., etc. We know how pissed off you were that if you were around, you wouldn't have made that announcement. So everyone switched channels. What I'm interested to know is how much did the War really like ramp up when they went live with you guys? Because I thought that was more a compliment to WCW, where Vince McMahon's gone, hang on a minute, we can't record this anymore because Eric Bischoff he's seeing this and he's reacting to it. How much more intensified, I suppose the word I'm looking for, did the quote unquote Monday Night Wars get when you were literally live against each other?
I think it was an evolution. If you remember, I gave away their finishes. I shit all over their shows. I would start my show 3 minutes before they started their show. I would give away their entire taped episode. So there was no reason to tune in. The Mick Foley thing happened several years later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had been giving away finishes and doing all kinds of dastardly shit long before I gave away the Mick Foley rock thing. That one did backfire, but I'd probably done the same stunt, a variation of that same stunt 100 times. And out of 100 times, it worked 100 times. On the 101th, is that even a thing?
He's invented a new word.
101st. It's going to be a t-shirt on ad-free shows.
Eric Bischoff says 101th. Who needs 83 weeks podcast when you got the 101th podcast?
But on the 101st effort, it backfired. But to answer your question, it did get more intense. I mean, when they were going, and it started earlier. If you remember, WCW and Nitro had defeated WWE soundly for about a year and a half or 2 years. It wasn't until the end of 1997, almost a year and a half after we'd been kicking their ass badly, that Vince McMahon went on TV and said, all right, we're going to change the way we're presenting this product to our audience. We're no longer going to insult your intelligence. We're going to do what Eric Bischoff was doing over on Nitro. And that's how the Attitude Era was born.
Yeah.
They went live, just like we went live. And this is like the most profound change, really. I mean, the live versus live thing is obvious, but the most profound change occurred when WWE, who had previously built their entire industry up until 1997, they built their entire industry on the teen and preteen audience. All of their characters, if you go back and look at it, all of their characters were very animated, very over the top, almost like real life cartoons, because that's what their audience reacted to. It was a teen and preteen audience. If you look at their storylines, they were very, I don't want to say childlike, but they were very teen and preteen type of storylines. And in 95, when I went head to head with them, I knew that I couldn't be better than them at going after the teen and preteen audience because they had such a lock on that audience and had been doing it for so long. But I looked over at the 18 to 34-year-old audience or 18 to 49-year-old audience and realized that they're not being served. Nobody's producing a wrestling show for that audience. I can't be better than them at what they do, but I could be way better than them at doing something over here because they're not doing anything. And I captured that 18 to 49-year-old demo. In November of 1997, after getting his ass kicked for a year and a half or so, Vince McMahon came out and made that statement. He announced that he was going to change the way they presented wrestling. Shortly thereafter, Vince McMahon became Mr. McMahon, the heel owner of WWF. They were going live every single week instead of live to tape. They were targeting that 18 to 49-year-old audience in a very sexually provocative, over-the-top, aggressive way. And quite frankly, in a way that we couldn't do at Turner Broadcasting. even, and not that I would have wanted to, because I just don't think that that takes creativity. That's kind of like shock value. And don't get me wrong, you know, half naked women still get my attention. No problem there. But it's not very creative. It just is what it is. But WWE, when they created the Attitude Era, they looked at what we were doing and said, okay, how do we do that? Only do it more. And when Vince McMahon was forced to change his business model and forced to follow the creative direction that WCW had previously established for almost a year and a half, I took that as a compliment. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, most definitely.
And again, the you know, live to tape, you know, that battle, once they finally went live to live, that was part of it, but that was the smallest part of it.
Fiona, what role do you think the Attitude Era, WCW, WWF, plays in what we see today with wrestling? You've got AEW, you've got NWA, you've got TNA coming back. What, like, you've got the new quote unquote new generation, shall we say, of Tony Khan and now Paul Levesque running WWE, NWA have rebooted. What influence does that WCW and WWF quote unquote Monday Night War have on what we see in today's product?
Personally, I think it's had a fairly significant impact. I think it's had that whole, I think back when you look at the Attitude Era and folk like DX and everything who were defying the rules and defying this and defying that and just being like, I'm going to be who I want to be. I think you see a lot of that now across the board, not just on WWE or on AEW or on NWA, but even in the indie scene. I can't speak for America, but over here in the UK, you tend to see that folk are very much their own selves now when they're wrestling. They don't seem to be quite so molded as they might have been pre the Attitude Era. I think that across the board that, I'm trying to articulate it, not doing a very good job here, but I generally feel like that the Attitude Era allowed folk to be a bit more creative and have a little bit more say in how their characters developed, and I think that's kind of gone on and continued over the years.
Yeah, no,
I agree. I mean, if you just look at, I mean, again, and I'm not trying to, you know, give myself credit here, but when we launched Nitro, it was important that we were live every week. WWE eventually, a year and a half later, went live every week. Now there's AEW is live every week. WWE is live every week. I created 2 different shows. They created 2 different shows. I went to 2 hours. They went to 2 hours. I went to 12 pay-per-views. They went to 12 pay-per-views. I mean, WWE has really followed the pattern that Nitro created. And the Attitude Era in general is still being kind of replicated to this day. You know, if you look at the Cruiserweight division in WCW, that was the first time anybody showcased and featured regularly, you know, guys that didn't weigh 250 pounds. That has opened the door to an entire 2 generations of new wrestling talent that don't happen to be 6'5" tall, however centimeters that may be over you all are at, and you know, 120 kilos. You know, you could be out there and, you know, if you're an average sized person, but you're very athletic, like a Will Ospreay, for example, you know, and all of the luchadors that we brought in. Look at Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio has become, I think, one of the most influential, important people in the history of professional wrestling over the last 30 or 40 years, because he was really the person that has made lucha mainstream.
Yeah.
He has really brought the culture of luchadors in such a positive way to the industry. All of that started really in WCW and has continued into WWE, and now we see it in AEW, and we see it all over the place with indie shows.
Adam, mate?
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to move on to a bit of more TL. We've done WWE a little bit, well, not too much, but TNA was another one. Andy, you was a massive TNA fan.
Huge TNA fan.
Because you mentioned the cruiserweights and the X division was a big part of TNA. So did you want to sort of, I know you wasn't there, you was mainly sort of consultative. You mentioned that on the Inside the Rope show that you were more sort of consultative with Hulk stuff. But was there a bit there where you were trying to influence the X division to try and make it like the cruiserweight division that you had in WCW?
The X division, that was like the most and I'm sorry, guys, I'll have to wrap this up pretty soon because I have a turkey on the grill, and we can do a part 2 to this. We can absolutely do a part 2 to this next week. But when I first got to TNA and everybody was talking about the X division, I said, "What's the X division?" And nobody could describe it. I said, "Well, what are the parameters? What makes it a division? Like, how do you become a part of the division? What are the qualifications?" Well, there really aren't any. So it's not like the cruiserweights, which was essentially a weight class under 220 pounds. It's not that. So what is it? Well, it's, X division, the only rules are there are no rules. I said, well, I just watched 2 matches that were exactly like that. That weren't X division matches. You have so many of these different, and again, it's kind of like going back to the drinking blood and stapling shit to people's faces and all that stupid, nonsensical, childish horse shit. There's no imagination, there's no creativity, there's no logic, there's no parameters, there's nothing that allows the viewer to go, okay, I understand what that is, so now I'm going to invest in it. At least with the cruiserweight division, there were smaller guys under 220 pounds, and they had a different style of wrestling. They were very athletic, very high flying, very fast paced, compared to the 6'5", 6'6", 300-pound guys that were big and powerful and larger than life, but slower as a result. There was a contrast between styles that made the cruiserweight division work. The X division was just, well, let's come up with a division and call it something. X is cool. Let's call it the X division. But what are the rules? Oh, fuck, I don't know. There's no rules. Well, what's the weight class? I don't give a fuck. We have Samoa Joe. We can have this 140-pound guy over here. Doesn't matter. There was just no thought given to it. It was just a gimmick, which is so often the case when something lacks creativity, it's drenched in gimmicks. And that's what the X division was.
I think we better let Eric get to his turkey.
Yeah, we don't want to be known. We don't want to be known as the show. We don't want to be known as the show that burned Eric Bischoff's turkey. Come on now,
no, and this is like we're recording this. We're doing this on a Monday.
Yes,
and Thanksgiving is actually Thursday. But my wife and I are going to be gone. We're traveling to visit my brother and sister and her family. So my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and my nephew are here with us today. So we're having an early Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, lovely.
So not only would you be the show that forced me to burn my turkey, you'd be the show that forced me to burn my Thanksgiving holiday turkey.
We can't do that.
We can't do that.
Can't do that. None of us want to do that, but I want to do a part 2 with you guys. So let's arrange it, because I'm sure you have a lot of more questions. And
absolutely.
Anything I can do to support you guys at any time, I'm happy to do. Just keep me in the loop.
Thank you so much, Eric. It really has meant so much to us that you've taken the time to come on.
It's my pleasure.
Our show.
I'll do anything for Fiona. That's the truth.
Exactly. Where would we be without you, Fee?
She is the queen of the microphone over here.
She's the queen, period. She says jump, I say how high.
Yeah.
Don't stop.
I'm surprised she didn't move into Buckingham Palace when the last queen passed away. But Eric, thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks, Eric.
Take care, Eric. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Wait, part 2.
Woo! Part 2. Well, guys, what an episode. Unbelievable to sit down and chat with Eric Bischoff. Like he said, he'll be back for part 2 next week. You heard it from the man himself. We'll sit down and we'll probably get into more TNA. We'll get into some WCW, WWE, Hall of Fame. But Fiona, always a pleasure to chat to the queen of the microphone. Thank you so much for coming on. Adam, I see you more than my own family. Always a pleasure to chat to you, my friend. You and I will be back later in the week. We've got Raw reviews dropping. We've got interviews coming up. We've got SmackDown. We've got AEW. NWA review coming with the queen herself will be back. Fiona and Adam will be back with the NWA. But ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back again. Make sure you check us out on social media at HTT Buckle on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find us. But till next time, everybody, this has been the Hitting the Turnbuckle. Buckle down. Stay safe.